Following the events of the Injustice incident, Superman remains imprisoned for the crimes he committed after establishing his regime. Deep inside the Batcave, Batman and Catwoman are discussing matters when Brother Eye, the advanced surveillance AI Batman created after Superman's fall to better monitor the world and prevent another global tyranny, suddenly issues an alert. It reports that there is trouble at the prison and that someone is attempting to reach Superman's cell. Batman immediately moves into action, ordering Brother Eye to prepare the teleporter while asking for details about the intruders. Brother Eye identifies 4 advanced androids, explaining that they possess enhanced strength, the ability to levitate, and powerful laser weaponry. As Batman prepares for what sounds like a dangerous assault, Brother Eye adds one final, unexpected detail that completely changes the tone of the situation. Alongside the androids is a woman carrying a pie. The woman Brother Eye detected turns out to be Martha Kent, Superman's mother. Far from launching an attack, she has simply come to visit her son, carrying a freshly baked pie with her. Accompanying her is Jonathan Kent. The 4 powerful androids surrounding them aren't invading the facility at all. They're acting as their escorts and security, ensuring the elderly couple can safely reach the prison. When Batman and Catwoman arrive at the prison, Batman is surprised to find that the mysterious visitor is Martha Kent. He greets her but immediately explains that, for security reasons, no one is allowed to see Clark, insisting, "It's too dangerous." Martha remains completely calm and asks Bruce a simple question. After everything that has happened, does he truly believe Clark would ever hurt his own mother? Batman quietly admits that he doesn't. Even so, he starts to explain. "But I'm afraid I still can't allow you to." Before he can finish, Martha walks straight past him. Without raising her voice, she firmly tells Bruce that she doesn't care how many supervillains he has stood up to over the years. He is not going to stand in her way. She reminds him, "You do not get to control everything, young man." As Martha continues toward the prison entrance, Catwoman gently places a hand on her shoulder and offers to escort her inside. Martha gladly accepts, calling Selina dear, and the 2 women begin walking together. Amused by what she just witnessed, Catwoman jokes that she'd love to learn how Martha managed to talk over Batman so effortlessly. Martha smiles and assures her that she can teach her. Together, the 2 head inside, leaving Batman standing behind. Jonathan Kent remains outside with Batman, surrounded by the android escorts. Jonathan isn't the least bit surprised by his wife's determination. He tells Bruce not to feel bad because once Martha has made up her mind, no one is going to stop her. He jokes that sometimes the immovable object meets the unstoppable force, and the only sensible thing the immovable object can do is step aside. Batman then notices that Jonathan isn't planning to visit Clark himself and asks if he's not going to see his son. Jonathan simply answers, "No." Bruce says he understands, but Jonathan replies that he doubts Bruce really does. Instead of letting Batman return to his duties, Jonathan opens the car door and firmly tells him to get in. Bruce starts to object, explaining that he has many responsibilities demanding his attention, but Jonathan cuts him off, telling him to call him Jonathan instead of Mr. Kent, and orders him to get in the damn car because they're going for a drink. Batman doesn't argue. Without another word, he gets into Jonathan's car. Moments later, the androids lift the entire vehicle off the ground, carrying it away from the prison as Jonathan takes Batman somewhere private for a conversation that has clearly been a long time coming. Inside the prison, Martha Kent is finally brought to Superman's cell. Catwoman respectfully waits outside, giving the mother and her son a private moment together. Standing before the reinforced glass, Martha calls out, "Clark!" Hearing his mother's voice, Superman looks up from where he was sitting on his bed in disbelief. "Ma?" he says as he quickly stands. When the security door opens, Martha sets the pie she brought aside and immediately walks towards her son. Without hesitation, she wraps him in a warm embrace. At first, Superman remains frozen. Despite possessing unimaginable strength, he seems afraid to return the hug, worried that he might somehow hurt her. Sensing the hesitation, Martha gently reassures him that it's okay and tells him he can hug her back because he can't hurt her. Only then does Clark finally put his arms around his mother and embrace her. For the first time since his imprisonment, he drops his guard, not as Superman, but simply as a son being comforted by his mother. The simple hug says more than words ever could, reminding Clark that despite everything that has happened, his mother still loves him unconditionally. After the emotional embrace, Martha wipes away the tears from her eyes while Clark sits back down on the bed in his cell. Wanting to know what has become of the world without him, Superman asks how things are outside. Martha answers with honesty, telling him that the world is getting along fine without him. At the same time, she adds that if he ever comes to his senses, she believes the world may still need him again one day. Clark isn't nearly as hopeful. He tells his mother, I'm not getting out of here." Martha doesn't argue or make promises. Instead, she simply replies, "We'll see," making it clear she hasn't given up on her son, no matter what anyone else believes. After a brief pause, Clark asks about Pa, wondering where Jonathan is. Martha says that if she knows her husband, he's probably somewhere arguing with a billionaire over who's paying for the drinks. Meanwhile, Jonathan Kent and Batman walk inside a quiet bar. When Batman points out that he's technically a trillionaire, Jonathan brushes it off, saying that's nice, but instead that it's still his round. After ordering 2 beers, Jonathan reveals that Alfred had asked him and Martha to look after Bruce, a comment that genuinely surprises Batman. Jonathan explains that he doesn't pretend to understand what someone with Bruce's wealth and responsibilities needs, but he can offer something just as valuable: a frank and honest conversation. He tells Bruce that he suspects very few people are willing to speak hard truths to him because Batman has a habit of disappearing into the shadows whenever he doesn't like something and intimidating everyone around him. Jonathan makes it clear that those tactics don't work on him. After all, he and Martha raised the most powerful man on Earth, and if he could set boundaries for a teenager capable of turning a mountain to dust, then Batman certainly isn't going to scare him. Jonathan then asks Bruce a simple question: how is it really going? Batman admits, "It's difficult, trying to save the world from itself without..." Jonathan finishes the thought for him, saying that Bruce is trying to save the world without overstepping, without becoming what Clark became. Jonathan asks Bruce a question that has weighed on his mind for a long time. He asks whether Clark came to him after Lois died. Batman admits that he did. Jonathan then asks the question that truly matters: did he ask for your help? Batman acknowledges that, in a way, he did. Jonathan then says, "You didn't help him." Bruce immediately points out that Clark had taken a life in cold blood, and everything that followed led him down the path of becoming a tyrant. Jonathan doesn't deny any of that. Instead, he gently stops Bruce and explains that he isn't talking about everything that happened afterward. Those were the actions of a tyrant. He wants to talk about that day, when Clark had just lost Lois and his unborn child. Batman then says, "He took a life." Jonathan agrees that Clark deserved to be held accountable for his actions, saying that men should be punished for the wrong they do. He even admits that he's stubborn and prideful as anyone, joking that he had just argued with a trillionaire over who was buying the beer. He admits, "And I'm not condoning Clark's actions," but he believes Bruce has been looking at Clark through an impossible standard, holding an impossible man to an impossible standard. According to Jonathan, this isn't simply a matter of right and wrong. He believes Batman forgot that, despite all of his incredible powers, Clark is as human as the rest of them. In the darkest moment of his life, Clark didn't need Bruce's forgiveness. He just needed his friend to understand. Jonathan continues by telling Bruce that he knows just how far gone Clark has become, and he isn't asking him to ignore everything Superman has done. Even so, he warns that there may come a day when Bruce will have to set aside his grievances. Batman asks if Jonathan himself could really do that. Jonathan answers honestly. He says he is every bit as disappointed and angry with Clark as anyone else. But he also comes from a small town where people couldn't afford to hold grudges forever. In a place where everyone knows each other, eventually you have to find a way to move forward. Looking at Bruce, Jonathan says that when all is said and done, the entire planet isn't really that much bigger. The same principle still applies. Batman insists that justice must be served. Jonathan nods, saying he understands that. But then he places a reassuring hand on Batman's shoulder and offers another perspective. If the world is ever on the verge of destruction and Bruce's code keeps Clark locked in a cell instead of allowing him to help save it, then there is no justice in that either. Jonathan ends with one final question that strikes Bruce personally. He asks him to think back to the night his own parents were murdered. If, in that moment, Bruce had been given the chance, would he have killed the man responsible? Batman replies that he was only a child. Jonathan reminds him that, in many ways, we're all children. Later, after reflecting on everything Jonathan had said, Batman decides to visit Superman in his prison cell. The two old friends stand silently on opposite sides of the barrier, simply looking at one another. Breaking the long silence with a faint smile, Clark jokes by asking whether Bruce does this silent staring routine with everyone he locks away, adding that it might explain why so many of his prisoners eventually go mad. The humor quickly fades as Superman asks the question, has the world actually become better with him behind bars? Batman responds, we're free. Clark presses Bruce further, asking whether freedom from his regime has truly meant less death, fewer wars, or less conflict. Batman doesn't answer immediately, and his silence speaks for itself. Clark remarks that he'll take the silence as a no. Bruce slowly removes his mask, shows his face to Clark, looking him directly in the eyes. He begins to speak. Superman, Batman struggles to find the right words. Looking directly at Clark, he apologizes. I don't think I'm sorry, Clark. Not for the years they spent fighting each other, but for Lois. It isn't an apology made out of duty. It's one filled with genuine regret. For a brief second, Superman is completely caught off guard. The anger that has been buried beneath years of resentment flashes across his face. His expression hardens, his jaw tightens, and he immediately cuts Bruce off with a sharp, "Don't." Batman doesn't argue or defend himself, he simply accepts Clark's reaction. Holding his mask tightly in his hands, he quietly repeats that he is sorry, that he wasn't there when Clark needed him most and that he should have been better. Superman closes his eyes tightly, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He says nothing, choosing silence instead as Bruce's words continue to sink in. Batman breaks the silence one final time. He admits that after everything that's happened, he can no longer honestly say the world is unquestionably better with Clark locked away in prison. The certainty he once had is gone. Then he says the one thing he knows without any doubt. I know it would be a finer world if she was still part of it. It's a simple statement, but it acknowledges the tragedy that set everything in motion and the immeasurable loss both of them have carried ever since. With nothing more left to say, Batman turns around and quietly walks away from his cell. He doesn't wait for a response or expect forgiveness. He simply leaves, having finally spoken the words he had kept buried for years. Left alone once again, Superman remains silent. Overcome by emotion, he covers his face with his hands. No longer the world's most powerful being, but simply a grieving man still mourning the love he lost. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel.